So if that is the case, then the socioeconomic whole, the market that we are of human beings interacting and exchanging with one another, would that then mean that prices are like neurotransmitters, or maybe money is the neurotransmitter, that we're actually signaling to one another what we value in the world? So money becomes like an index for our valuations and our aims.
Yes. And so when you would look at where we are today with a completely broke monetary system, like to the nth degree broke on a global scale, because there's no peg, there's no unit that is pegging labor data. That's how I look at it. Like, people are familiar with a dollar, people are familiar with a Bitcoin. It's labor data. If you have one of those, it represents stored labor that has been performed. And if I then hand that over to you, it means something. But if the value of this stored labor is diminishing at a breakneck pace, what happens is, just like in your brain, if the biological value system is off, well, now you got somebody who's, out in public and they're howling at the moon and doing these strange behaviors that don't make any sense to people that have a normally functioning biological value system that's functioning inside their brain. And that's how I view financial markets today, is if you are constantly manipulating the cost of capital down to nothing, to zero, you're saying, if I borrow money and it doesn't cost me anything to do that, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And that's what central banks have been doing by bidding the bond market and stepping in and manipulating the fixed income market. Now they're starting to manipulate just money into the hands of anybody and everybody, which further compounds the need for the fixed income market to have more quantitative easing. Like, all of those things have this reflexive loop, which involves the money just getting further and further debased. And then you talk about it being competitively done on a global scale between nation states. And you start to understand real fast, we need a lobotomy globally. And Bitcoin supplies the lobotomy.
So the collective mind has become corrupted because we've poisoned the neurotransmitter or distorted the neurotransmitter, whatever you want to call it. And so there's the yin yang thing I'm seeing in the brain here is we have conscious, unconscious control. Conscious is much more yang. It's assertive. It can go different directions. It's controllable and controlling. But the unconscious is yin. It's very, it's dark. It's mysterious. We can't access all of it. It's much more encompassing than conscious awareness. You can maybe store a phone number in your head and your conscious awareness. Your unconscious stores everything else, like just infinitely more, basically. So is it then in that collective domain, it's almost as if the conscious aspect, maybe that's the state where it actually tries to consciously contradict the market at times, where it's like the market's selecting this, but the state would step in.
That's kind of a good example, because the state is kind of like directing the body, the human body, right? Of a collective body, of where it's trying to go.
And the literal bodies, right? On a military standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's probably a kind of a close parallel. And then in the background, you have all the people that are providing those signals. Now, so when you study the brain, one of the really important, the grand central station of the brain is the thalamus. And this is such a cool story. I've got to tell you this story. So there's a toilet paper test. I don't think this was in the book that you read. There's a toilet paper test where if you take 2 toilet paper tubes and you put them up to your eyes so that you can only see, whatever picture would be displayed in one, and you could put another picture in the other one. What they found is, let's say you take 2 very different pictures. One could be a picture of a house with a white background. And let's say the other picture could be of a basketball with a white background. and you put those toilet paper tubes on so that when the person's looking at these two images, all they see are those two images, but they're different images in each eye. And so what do you think the person sees when they're looking at something that has total rivalry like that? Okay. Well, if the pictures are somewhat meaningless to the person, what happens is the person will only see one of the two images. That's all they have conscious access to. So I would just see a house. That'd be it. I don't see any basketball whatsoever. It's not even there. And then like 5 seconds later, it almost seemed like somebody had changed the picture over to a basketball. And then I'll see the basketball for 5 seconds. And then it'll flip back to a house for 5 seconds. And in my brain, I am seeing both of these images. When they do imaging of the brain, what they see is that the brain is processing, the subconscious brain is actually processing both of those images simultaneously with equal magnitude. But the thalamus is only allowing one of those images to proceed forward into the neocortex where the person has conscious access. Now, this is really neat. If they take those pictures, okay, and they actually display them on like a video screen so that there's a refresh rate, like 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second, okay, and they swap out one of the frames. And I think for 30 or 60 frames per second, if they swap out one of the 60 frames, and you were looking at a screen that just was displaying, let's just say, a basketball image, and one of the 60 frames was something completely different, right? If a person looks at that screen, they cannot notice that, right? They'll just tell you, oh yeah, there's a basketball on the screen. Did you see any flash? Did you see? No, I didn't. It's just a basketball, right? That's what the person will tell you when they see something like that. So now going back to this toilet paper tube test, when they've got two different images in each eye, and they put one frame like out of 60 or 30. I can't remember if it was a 30 or 60. They swapped one frame on one image. And then the person looked at both of those images. You know what happened? The person would only see the one image. And it was the one that had the messed up frame. Okay. It wasn't oscillating back and forth between the pictures. It was just the basketball. That's all you'd continue to see, because the brain was picking up, your subconscious brain was picking up and saying, there's something off about that image on the left. And I'm going to continue to display that because it's not right. There's something wrong. And the thalamus is controlling that input and saying, I don't know why, but there's something off with this and you need to continue to see it. Okay. So now you have to ask yourself, what the hell is this thalamus that I have no control over feeding my conscious access that's happening in the background from my subconscious, when maybe I have 100 different things that are being sensed in the body right now? And what is it allowing through that bottleneck choke point to gain conscious access to? So good luck with that one. It's insane, right? I just don't. It's just fascinating to me.
Is it then? It's drawing attention to the anomaly or the error. Is that right?
Yes. Well, it shows you how sensitive your subconscious is.
Yeah.
Okay. That what you're telling yourself that you're seeing, your body as a whole, as a collective, your brain as a whole, as a collective, is processing way more than what you think you know. Period.
Yeah.
Right? Because that wouldn't be possible. So your subconscious knows that there's something off there, even though your conscious access would continue to tell you there's nothing different about that.
This calls to mind actually the definition of intelligence I got from talking to Jeff Booth. And he said that intelligence at its most basic level is just error correction. And that we are, again, when that conscious mind is trying to perform a specific operation, it's trying to identify any errors in the process and correct them so that it passes it, I guess, back to the unconscious error free, maybe. But it sounds like the conscious and unconscious mind working together to identify and resolve errors. which is a really interesting definition of intelligence or consciousness, because that's exactly what a market does too. A market is trying to resolve errors, right? If
that's right.
The classic earthquake in Chile, copper is disrupted, the price goes up, everyone gets the signal to either use substitutes, produce more copper, or it's resolving errors through the price signal.
So here's a pet peeve of mine. You'll hear people argue about the idea of efficient market hypothesis. Okay. We can look at the brain, and in the example that I just provided, if you believe in an efficient market hypothesis, you say, well, that's impossible. The brain can't make that mistake. But we know it's making the mistake.
Yeah.
We know for a fact it's making the mistake.
Right.
Right. And so I would say, as we jump over to the example that you just provided, a person that's, subscribes to the efficient market hypothesis is going to say, it's impossible for the market to misprice this. Right. Well, let me tell you, and people know, because I keep bringing this up, and I'm not doing it in a braggart way, but like, hey, I had an opinion before the halving happened. You and I were on 11 May talking about it, and I put my money where my mouth was. I went out and bought options and like all those things, just like a lot of other people, because my opinion was the market was not efficient and it didn't have a clue as to what the heck was about to happen.
That's right.
Now, we're saying that we were right? There's no way to prove that we were right definitively, because you could make the argument that it wasn't any of those factors that we were considering back then, and it was some other external factor, right? That's how a person could argue the opposite side of that. But I just don't buy the efficient market hypothesis. I think in most cases, it is very valid, but there are instances and opportunities where it is not. And those are the instances I'm looking for.
Yeah, I agree completely, especially as it relates to something like Bitcoin being assimilated into the marketplace. It's just never been seen before, right? Like, had there been multiple monetization events throughout human history, maybe the market would be better at pricing in Bitcoin halvings, for instance. But when there's no corollary, that it's all the information is not priced in. It's just not possible. And I think so. The other thing that comes to mind here is that the reflexivity that you mentioned between money and mind, the money is almost an extension of the mind in a way. We're all wiring our minds together through the price signal through money. And then if we consciously corrupt the money, which is effectively what we're doing with central banking, right? We're taking by declaration of fiat, I'm going to overturn what the free market has selected or would select as money and dictate that this fiat currency is money instead of gold or Bitcoin or anything else. We are corrupting that. We're corrupting the extension of our mind. And it seems like that reverberates backwards, reflexively into our individual minds. And so this is where you get into all, the fiat food and fiat behavior and fiat business models that pervades in the modern age.
Well, think about it in the biology context. If the biological valuation system in the brain is off in one area, that will have a reflexive impact on the other lobes over time. And so when people were talking about the fiat food and that kind of stuff, it just makes sense that would be what would come out of a broken monetary valuation system. It totally makes sense that the education system shouldn't cost $200,000 plus to go get a 4-year education from, a majority of classes that you could just learn online for, or on the Sailor Academy for free, right? Like it just kind of, it all starts to really kind of click together and make sense if you subscribe to the, this fundamental idea that we're talking about.
Yeah. This is where, again, the name of the show here is the What is Money Show, because it has so many damn answers, that question, what is money? Now, if we call it an extension of our mind or a reflexive tool for the mind, these other pieces start to click together.